Good evening, members. Good evening, officers and members of the public. Welcome to Tendring District Council Planning Committee on Thursday, the 15th of February 2024. Committee meeting is also going out live, is also being recorded, and the link to the live stream can be found on the Council's website www.tendringdc.gov.uk/live meetings. For the purpose of the recording, I will introduce everyone. I'm Councillor Maria Fowler, Chairman of the Planning Committee, and I'll introduce members of the committee separately. Councillor Alexander.
Good evening, Chairman.
Councillor Cottons.
Good evening, Chairman.
Councillor McWilliams.
Good evening, Chairman.
Councillor Smith.
Good evening, Chair.
Councillor Sutra.
Good evening, Chair.
Councillor White.
Good evening, Chairman.
And Councillor Wiggins.
Good evening, Chairman.
Thank you, members. The Council officers assisting us this evening are from Committee Services, the Committee Services Manager, Mr Ian Ford, and Maddie Adger and Hattie Dawson-Drazisic from Leadership Support. From Planning Services, Planning Officer Michael Pingram, Planning Manager John Pateman-G, and Director of Planning Gary Kiver. And online we will have our Planning Solicitor Joanne Fisher. Changes to the agenda running order, there are none. Each application will be presented by the officer, followed by public speaking. The applicant or agent, any member of the public who has already asked to speak for or against the application, then will be followed by a speaker from the town or parish council, and finally the ward councillor. Members of the committee will then have a chance to question the officer. Once all the questions are answered, the committee will then debate. When all the points are discussed, finally I shall ask if we have a resolution and then call for a proposer and a seconder, and we shall vote in accordance with the normal rules. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence and substitutions, please, Mr Ford.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This evening I can report apologies for absence from Councillor Gina Placey, and Councillor Adrian Smith is substituting on her behalf tonight. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr Ford. Minutes of the last meeting. To confirm, sign as a correct record, the minutes of the meeting of the committee held on Tuesday the 16th of January. I haven't received any amendments. Do I have a proposer for those minutes? Councillor Cottons, seconded. Councillor Alexander. Are we all in favour? If I could have a show of hands, please. Thank you. I'll now sign those. Thank you, Mr Ford. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any? None. Thank you, members. Item 4, questions on notice pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 38. Are there any, Mr Ford?
None received, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much. Item 5 is our first application on the agenda, which is A123/01265 Full, Coppins Hall Community Centre, Malden Way, Clacton. And I shall hand over to Mr Pateman-G to present this application.
Thank you. So this is for the proposed temporary siting of a storage container, which is already on site, and obviously you've all visited the site today, so you would have seen it in its entirety. This is to the rear of the community centre, but I will just state that it's just a storage container. There is no, it may well be in association with that use, but I will just be honest here to say that it is just for storage, and it could be used for storage of any user. And the storage nature isn't specifically restricted to domestic, commercial or otherwise, it is storage. Also just point out as well that the land it sits upon is council owned, which is why it's before you today. And I will quickly go through this as you've been there today. It's just outside the community centre. The aerial photographs actually do show it to be located there because it's currently there at the moment, and there was a previous temporary permission. And I'll just run through these. There is graffiti on the storage container, which you probably witnessed. I'm rather hopeful that there's nothing on here that's too unacceptable to be on a slide, but I'll just skip through them. If I need to go back to them for any purposes, please let me know, but you would have all seen that today. The plans show where it is located, just outside the play area, and it's a standard container in terms of design, and that's about it in a nutshell. We have an update to your papers in respect of conditions. We have updated one of the conditions in respect of its temporary permission to ensure the wording is correct. The temporary nature of this would be for 3 years, and after 3 years we would seek it to be removed. And ultimately we also have updated it, given its current condition in terms of the container that is there at the moment, to seek to repaint the container appropriately. That's an update there. Ultimately, we recognise this does have harm, but given the nature of it, current outstanding need, and the temporary nature of this, we consider that 3 years, I would say 3 years, is an appropriate time for the occupier or the user, of the unit to look for alternatives that are more appropriate. So 3 years we feel is justified as a condition, and the recommendation on that basis is one of approval.
Thank you, Mr. Pateman G. There are no speakers, public speakers for this application, so we'll go over to members for questions for the officer. Councillor White.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Pateman J has just said that it stands out rather like a sore thumb in its dark blue. We're suggesting that it should be green, and also we're suggesting that it should be done within 1 month of the date of approving, so that I think it should blend in a bit better with the countryside. So we want to put a time span on it as per the conditions that we've got.
Councillor Wiggins and then Councillor Alexander.
Thank you. I don't know. Yes, I hear what Councillor White is saying, and the fact that it's going to be potentially painted green to blend in with the landscape. Is there a possibility? Can you get graffiti paint so that if someone were to try and write on it, that they wouldn't be able to, and that was part of the condition?
Unfortunately, there are paints that claim to be less able to be drawn over with graffiti, but there's no perfect solution. So if it could be difficult to enforce as a technicality, but I've not found we've not seen a successful one yet. So we have to sort of do what we can.
Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Chair. I take on board what Councillor White has said, also what Councillor Wiggins has said, but I think this has been very well thought out. It is for a very good cause, and it's also shrouded with enough conditions around it to make it a viable proposition. So when you're ready, Chair, I'm prepared to go for this, rather than dilate any further on its excellency, and to say let us go for approval on this as laid out in the agenda.
Can I just ask you to confirm, Councillor Alexander, you're proposing approval?
I am proposing.
Thank you very much.
Chair.
Okay. So we any more questions for the officer? Comments? Councillor McWilliams?
I would be pleased to second that proposal.
So we have a proposal for approval as per the conditions from Councillor Alexander, seconded by Councillor McWilliams. So if we're all happy, we'll go to the vote. Could I have a show of hands, please, for approval? Thank you all. It's unanimous. That application is approved. Item 6 on the agenda, application A2-23/01418/4, Bram Hall Farm, Bentley Road, Little Bromley, and to present the application to us is our officer, Michael Pingram. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. So this application relates to land located at Braham Hall Farm. The application seeks planning permission for the replacement of a former agricultural building with 2 detached dwellings, which is in place of 2 dwellings granted prior approval back in June 2023. So the application site is located approximately 350 metres to the east of Bentley Road within Little Bromley. There are 4 agricultural buildings on the site, previously all used for agricultural purposes, but currently unoccupied. With the 2 buildings subject to this planning application sited to the north, if I move to the next one, to the north and south of the site. Braham Hall itself is sited approximately 80 metres to the south and is a Grade 2 listed building. As you can see from this image here, the character is largely rural in character, with large areas of grass and agricultural land out to all sides. There is some sporadic built form more to the west though. So I understand members have been to the site this morning, but I'll just run through some photos just in case it might well have changed a little bit because my photos are from a few weeks back. But this is facing east towards the existing building. This is facing northeast towards it. And this is an even older photo back from last summer when the sun was shining, and that was looking east towards the building. And this is just looking south towards the building. So in June 2023, prior approval was granted for the conversion of the agricultural buildings subject to this planning application, as well as the 2 other buildings sited adjacent to the northeast and northwest of the site, but within that same sort of area, into a total of 4 dwellings. Specifically, the building to the south of the site was granted permission to convert into 2 detached dwellings, each measuring 203 square metres and each being served by 4 bedrooms. And the building to the north was to be used for the parking of vehicles. The additional conversion of the buildings located to the east and west of the site are separately being carried out in accordance with the plans as part of that previous application, and therefore and do not form part of this current application. So just show you some images of the previously approved elevations just on your screen now. And in comparison, this is what's being proposed. It's slightly misleading because the lack of colour might make it look like there's quite a difference, but they're actually very, very similar, and the materials will look exactly the same as this previous elevation. Similarly, the previously approved floor plans here are very similar to what's being proposed now. And this is the previously approved block plan. And this is what's being proposed now, with the main alteration being the easternmost dwelling located a couple of metres further east. So in terms of the principal development, the site does fall outside of a recognised settlement boundary and therefore technically is contrary to policy. However, officers note that the principle has previously been established within the prior approval consent, and this application essentially represents replacement dwellings, which forms a significant material consideration. The proposal is very similar to that previously granted consent. The floor space remains at 406 square metres combined. The access is the same, the design is very similar, and the height of the building and number of bedrooms is unaltered. As I said, the main difference is just that plot 4 has been slightly relocated about 2.5 metres just to the east here. So given this and the previous permission remains extant until 2026, officers conclude there is a reasonable fallback position and do not object in principle. During the lifetime of the application, amended drawings have been provided which show the proposed dwellings to now be of a very similar design and the same size to those previously consented. There was initial concern that the design had become a more urbanised appearance. However, amended plans did address this through the removal of balconies. The dwellings would replace an existing structure in broadly the same location, as I said, just the one dwelling slightly relocating. They have a very similar footprint. There's no net increase in the number of dwellings either. So taken as a whole, the impact of the sort of character area is not considered to be significantly harmful. There are residential properties located adjacent to the site. These two that have just been approved within that same prior approval consent are the most closely related, as well as Braham Hall, which is approximately sort of 80 metres to the southwest. However, given that the design and the scale of the dwellings are very similar to that previously granted consent, there is not considered to be any additional impact as a result of the proposal before you. As I said, the Braham Hall is Grade 2 listed just to the southwest down here. ECC Heritage, when they were consulted, did initially raise concerns with the design of the dwellings, particularly the features such as the balconies and canopies that contribute to a more residential appearance, but following this, amended drawings were provided to remove the balconies. It's important to note that ECC Heritage have maintained their concerns about the residential character of the proposed dwellings, and they see this as an opportunity to potentially enhance what's there. However, officers have fully acknowledged the design is very, very similar to that already approved and extant. So therefore, we don't feel we can raise an objection based solely on the grounds of heritage impacts. On the update sheet, I've now included the full set of initial comments that ECC Heritage made, just so you've got full clarity of exactly what it was. The previous agenda just showed the revised comments. And I've also slightly amended paragraphs 6.26 and 6.30, just to make clear that the conservation of the listed building is given great weight in the determination of the application. However, on this occasion, the public benefits do outweigh any harm to the heritage asset. Essex Highways have been consulted and stated from a highway and transportation perspective, the impact of the proposal is acceptable, subject to conditions, and there is sufficient parking provision within the site. ECC Ecology initially raised concerns that there was insufficient ecological information available for them to fully determine, for officers to fully determine the application, as the demolition of the agricultural building had the potential to impact upon bats if potential roosting features were present, and therefore they requested a preliminary ecological appraisal. However, the agent for the application has highlighted that the building is in the process of being dismantled, together with extensive operations to the remainder of the site and overall site, following the granting of the previous prior approval planning permission, and also provided additional photographs of the building. Following this, Ecology have confirmed that this additional evidence means that there's not potential for the roosting of bats, and therefore they don't raise any objections no longer. So in conclusion, the proposed demolition of an existing agricultural building and its replacement with two dwellings is acceptable in principle following the previous prior approval consent. Whilst one of the dwellings has been slightly located further east than the previously approved layout, it is overall of a very similar size and design, same access, same number of bedrooms. Therefore, officers are content that the proposal would not be harmful to the character and appearance of the area. There are no significant issues in respect of impact on neighbouring amenities. Essex Highways Authority have not objected, and there is sufficient parking space. So therefore, subject to the completion of a legal agreement to secure financial contribution towards RAMS, and also subject to the removal of condition 12 as per the update sheet, the application is considered to be policy compliant, and we're recommending for approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. We have one speaker for this item, the agent, Mr. Legree. You know where the seat is. You have 3 minutes from when you push the little red button. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, members, and also to the Officer for a very comprehensive report. Just a couple of points, really. Members met this morning the applicants, who are the directors of DA Cant, a very well-known business, one of the largest contractors of concrete works and road works in the area. They've just taken on a £20 million scheme on behalf of Taylor Wimpey. They just told me that this morning, that was announced this week. The directors have always been local. One lived in Misley and one lived in Fortsoken. They want to come back into the district. Their yard is in Dedham. Therefore, this scheme is for themselves. And also, one of the other barns that has been is being converted is for an elderly parent, and another one, I understand, is for a daughter. So the family will be living on site. It's a £1.25 million project that they're putting into the economy, and there are 10 workers or tradespeople on site all the time, various different trades, sparkies, plumbers, etc. And that's a year project, so quite a significant element in the area. What members didn't see is that a very similar scheme has actually been approved next door to Little Bromley Church, which is also a Grade 2 building, only about a mile or so from this site, and that's been completed. Well worth seeing if anybody's in the Little Bromley area. In this particular scheme, yes, we have received the prior approval due to a variety of reasons. One, based on sustainability, insofar as the conversion scheme would be difficult to achieve the sustainability levels that the applicants really want to see in terms of all the codes of energy efficiency and so on. And two, the extra costs that have come about because of the county highways, which they're not objecting to, and they can do the works quite adequately, but they've all added extra costs. The difference with doing a new build is quite significant, partly because you don't have to pay 20% VAT. So whilst the Exchequer might not necessarily wish to have that, clearly 20% is quite a saving on a £1.25 million project. On the addendum sheet, you have got all the various comments from the county heritage officer, and he talks there about balconies and canopies being removed, that the windows should be, the scheme is particularly cluttered and should be revised, a metal roof finish should be retained, a zinc roof should be proposed as per the previous scheme, and metal window frames. We have done all of those. All of those elements have been incorporated. What, however, the applicants believe in this instance is that this is virtually identical, I think, or near identical, the officers used, to the prior approval scheme, and effectively retains the agricultural format of the barn by having that barrel vault. And that's what you'll see also at Little Bromley.
Just over the 3 minutes, Mr. Legree.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Pingram, is there anything you'd like to come back on that one? Okay, thank you. So I'll now go over to members for questions for the officer. Councillor White.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The officer has explained quite well that this has previously been approved, so what we're really looking at tonight is just a slight movement of the buildings from what was previously agreed. But my question is, these are being done under section Q, I think. Now, this will mean that on that site we shall have 5 dwellings. Is that the maximum number that will be permitted on that site? The reason I ask the question is there are still some farm buildings around that area, and so is 5 the maximum?
We'll come back to you with a detailed answer because the regs are a bit confusing, but just to clarify, the previous Class Q application allowed 4 dwellings on site, but we'll just check the regs because I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what it goes by the floor space, but if you can just bear with us a moment, we'll clarify that.
ultimately, there's two definitions within the Class Q order. There's a definition of smaller, there's a definition of larger. Now, I'm going to make an assumption here because I haven't got the floor spaces immediately available, but given that on the smaller element, you are allowed up to 5, so we're within that and we're fine. So, but anyway, for the purposes of this application, that's not an issue to resolve over.
Councillor Sudra.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. On the approved plan, the gap between the two dwellings is 2 metres, but now it will be 2.5. Is that correct?
Yeah, just to clarify, I'm not exactly sure the distance between the two properties themselves, but what the point I was trying to make is that compared to the previous scheme, plot 4, which just on, hopefully you can see where I'm hovering on the screen, that has, if you can see, I don't know if it's that clear, but the blue dashed line is where it's, and it's now just been relocated slightly 2.5 metres to the right on the screen, but to the east basically. But the distance between these two properties themselves, I'm not certain. It probably does say that on that drawing, but I can't read it from here. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so it is the gap between the two buildings that's spacing out?
That is essentially the answer. On this drawing here, so I don't know how clear it is, but the dashed blue line shows the outline of where the two dwellings were on the previous permission, and plot 3 is essentially the same, and then plot 4 started about where my cursor's hovering at the moment, but it's just been moved along 2.5 metres. So yes, to answer your question, it's been moved. So it's 2.5 metres further to the east, which probably creates about 4 metres between the two, roughly.
So is that the regulation that, like I heard earlier on the site visit, that there are certain fire regulation sort of to what, you know, is allowed between two dwellings?
That ultimately you're creating two dwellings which will have a boundary, and so in building control terms you are looking at what is combustible along that boundary and other fire regulational issues. Without bringing up the 1984 Act and all the regulations that go with it, I don't know for certain, but ultimately I have got a building control officer here with me today, but it certainly would be one of the factors that probably have come into the need to just give themselves sufficient gap to ensure that fire transfer, fire combustibility and other issues associated are less likely, and that would probably would be it is a fire related matter in terms of building control, but I can't give you an exact measurement because I don't have that with me.
So am I in the understanding that it's like within regulation as it is now?
If I may, ultimately, you know, semi-detached houses, terrace houses have common boundaries, and fire regulations apply to that as well. It is a matter of preference, and if obviously there are fire regulations that come into it, there will be means and ways to design the building or the means of escape or whatever it might be differently depending on the house type and its circumstances. The preference here is for two detached properties, give them a bit of distance in order to comply probably easier with fire regulations than not. Again, you're dealing with a matter though that is not a planning matter in the context of dealing with this issue. Building regulations will cover themselves ultimately when it gets to that stage, hence why I'm not an expert on those. You know, the preference here is to have that distance. That's the proposal before you, and what we're trying to say to you is really it's not that much difference from what was really agreed before, so much so that we don't think we'd ever be able to defend any kind of refusal on that issue alone. So that's the proposal before us.
That's great, thank you.
Members, are there any more questions for the officer for this application, or if not, we'll go into debate. Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the site location plan, which, oh, there we are. It appears by magic. Okay, the ingress and exit area, display that will bring it, I take it from this 8, gosh, this is very small, it's writing 8.6, 8 times 6 on the junction. This will be extended out to that size.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
I'm going up to the fork, if I may now, please. The fork is some 200 metres up the track, and the fork will be sitting, according to this, with a minimum width of 4.2 metres. Is that the proposed? Because on the agenda, the recommendation, it should be 5 metres from Essex Highways.
Yeah, sorry for the delay there. So yeah, condition 6 does say about a minimum width of 5.5 metres for the first 6 metres from the junction just up there, and the remaining part of the track is 4.2 metres as per what that plan says. Appreciate it's not that clear on the screen.
Right. Again, I'd like to get this in my mind, if I may. This is a private track, and the developer is going out of their way, in my opinion, to put this new road system right the way through, which will greatly improve the road safety. But I go back to the fact is that we are looking at the fork. I'm going to the fork. So are you saying the 200 metre up to the fork will be 5.5 metres, and from there on in, beyond that fork will be 4.2? Is that correct? Am I reading that right?
No, so condition 6 is recommending that the first 6 metres from the junction up to the north here would be 5.5, and then the remainder would be 4.2.
Councillor Alexander, can you put your mic on? Thank you. Thank you.
Chair, I'm having a senior moment. I hope you forgive me. It's to be retained. Who would be responsible for retaining the track and the place by the fork? Who will be that? Would that be the ownership of the people who live there? Does it fall to them?
Well, according to the application form, we have a certificate A, which means that the red line outline is all within the owner's ownership as declared. So the assumption is that that track is maintained by the owner. They may have other covenants or rights of way or other private ownership issues we don't know about, but ultimately the expectation is likely that the owner would maintain the track.
Chair, just come back one time. Um, we looked at the application today, and uh, I was rather taken back by it. It looked extremely good in my mind. So, Chair, I'd like to wait until you're ready for debate, and then I'd like to come back in with your permission.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Members, are there any more questions for the officer? Because we can go into debate now, and I will, Councillor Alexander, take that as the proposal. Councillor Cossens.
Just got one question relating to conditions that were being put on that, you know, what we've just been talking about, and we've got conditions 6, 7, 8 and 9, I think, all relate to the access to the development. And I noticed sort of 8 and 9 both say prior to occupation, but I just wonder why condition 6 is prior to first use of the existing track at the junction that the works are due, because I mean prior to first use, I mean we use the track today, so first use has happened, so shouldn't that say prior to occupation as well? I mean, condition 6 was what I was really looking at, was surely that should be prior to occupation as well, because we used it.
Yeah, we're happy to, if members are minded to move the recommendation subject to the tweak of that condition, we're happy with that.
Councillor Alexander, do you accept that for your proposal with that amendment?
Yeah, yes, Chair. Also, I will also have a condition in addition to the conditions which are laid down under condition 8 on page 36. I'm wondering if you will receive that now, or shall I wait? What's your direction on that, please?
Are there any further questions for the officer? We are in the debate now, but if there are any further questions. No? Okay. So we have a proposal for approval as per the conditions with one amendment. And removal of condition 12. Thank you, Mr. Guyver. Is that acceptable, Councillor Alexander? Okay.
But I do wish to speak on another part of the conditions which I would like to see added as one of the conditions for...
Go ahead. Yes, please do.
You know, some applications come before you and they are pretty much unarguable, and this is one of them. It ticks all the right boxes, and I can see the vision that these people have, good developers. So the only thing I'm worried about is, again, I go back to the track. And what I'm worried about is that, and I aim this not as a question, but maybe I'd like to put this on as a condition, Chair. What I'm worried about is that you still have people walking 190 metres up a road. Now, it's complicated. It's a minefield going into, I looked at it this afternoon, it's a total minefield going into public right-of-way and bridle paths and footpaths, all kinds of clever things. It's difficult. So I would like to see the condition added that signage, not complicated, simple signage, which says that people are walking on the street, or however that would be worded, just to allow people to know that there's oncoming traffic and people walking on that, and they'll have 190 metres to do that in.
If I may come in on that one. Ultimately, we have an existing track, existing right-of-way, public right-of-way, and the current, default use of the site is agricultural use, for which tractors, you name it, can go up and down this track, which are unrestricted. We already have a prior approval in respect of this being a property for which we would not have engaged, that condition is not engaged for either. And I would say that this application does come with a host of benefits in respect of improvement of that track and widening of it in any event. I would not be recommending that condition as additional cost to the applicant when that risk is in place currently and it is not a burden of this development, in my view, to require or be necessary to require signage. But that is my opinion to you only.
Right, may I come back, Chair?
May?
As you rightfully say, it's exactly what it is now, and there's considerable work to be done on that track to make it even safer. Our role here is to protect the people as we see it. It's a perceived thing that we perceive that, or I perceive that the people who are going to use that track would benefit from that signage. Although I can see why you don't wish to go along with this recommendation to the condition, I also must, with all respect, point out that you were talking at that time when that track was first built, agricultural vehicles, yes, maybe, but there was a property there. Now you're talking about a lot more properties there, which will increase the road use somewhat. And the one thing I did highlight this morning, and I got it in here actually in the phone, is that that adequate signage should be made, and that's a directive from HM government on public rights of way. If it's needed, and I think in this situation it is needed, that we should be able to do that. However, I will lean to your professionalism on this, and I will go with the decision of my colleagues if that comes to that.
I'm not out to have an argument over signage, ultimately. The debate is for you to consider if it is necessary and essential to mitigate the burden of this development and whether or not you'd actually use it as a reason for refusal, possibly. Ultimately, I would say the county is responsible for adequate signage of its public rights of way. And I would also again point out that not only do we have the agricultural use in situ, but we also have already got approval for these dwellings as a fallback position, which is given significant, or has to be given significant weight. And on that basis, my professional opinion remains that if pushed, it is not, in my opinion, a defendable condition to impose. But this is your meeting, not mine. You will act accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Papenji. Councillor Cossins.
I was going to say, I don't know whether Councillor Alexander had actually moved approval already, but I would be willing to second it on the understanding we weren't going to put signage on there. So I would second it, but only if it didn't include signage or extra signage.
So let's have a recap on that. We have a proposal from Councillor Alexander to approve the application as per the conditions, but withdrawing condition 12 and adding the amendment to condition 6. And Councillor Cossins, you're prepared to second the approval as long as it doesn't include the signage, extra signage. Okay, so you have a proposer and a seconder. Are you happy with that, Councillor Alexander?
No. Because you cannot second something with that. You cannot second something with that if you're opposing what's been.
All right, I accept that. That's fair enough. Yeah, I
so
accept
would
that.
you prefer that I withdrew?
That's entirely up to you. That's entirely up to you if you want to withdraw your proposal.
Well, Chair, as I said, I looked at this afternoon and I've had some dealings with this in the past. I couldn't speak to the Ramblers because they would have all the info. Anything that's on public land is the ownership of the local authority. Anything that's on private land comes under the umbrella of the actual landowner themselves. And the care of these things should fall to them. It's in government requisite, and that's basically what I want to say. I didn't ask for much, a sign to say that. I can't see what damage this could do or vast amount of expenditure. There's nothing wrong with the application. It's just I'm concerned that people walking down there and possibly engaging with vehicles coming out or coming in.
You have had a response from our officer on that point, and he has given you his professional opinion on that point. Ford.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Councillor Alexander has moved with the granting approval with the addition of a condition regarding signage. Put simply, is there anybody on the committee that is willing to second that proposal? Because if there isn't, then that automatically falls, and then it's back open to the floor to then move something else. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Ford. So therefore, we are at that point where Councillor Cossins?
Well, if there isn't anybody seconding it,
No.
I will move the recommendation as you stated just now.
Just now, yeah. You will. Thank you. Okay, so we do have a proposal and a seconder, and I'll now go to the vote. Said that? I thought you said you seconded it. Sorry, I misheard you.
No, what I was saying was, as Mr. Ford's just pointed out, appears to be no seconder for the original motion, so I was moving a new motion to say, as you laid out just now, with the change to the condition and the dropping of condition 12, I would move approval.
Yes, I've got you now. Yes, I misheard you the first time, so I do apologise. So that is the new proposal from Councillor Cossins. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Sudra. So we will now go to the vote for approval. So can I have a show of hands, please? That application is now approved. Thank you, members, and we will now have a 5-minute break. Welcome back, everybody. Are we back on the live stream, Maddie? Just going to push the button. We will be in a minute. Yep, live stream's running. Okay, welcome back. So we're now on item 7, which is application A323/01601/full, the Naze Peninsula, Old Hall Lane, Walton on the Naze, and to present this item, Michael Bingham.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so this application is for a proposed modification to the access arrangement to allow access to the foreshore as a result of erosion. The application is before members purely because Tendring District Council is the applicant and owner of the site. So the site is an open parcel of land located outside of a recognised settlement boundary within the adopted local plan. The area around the planning application site comprises a public open space adjacent to the coastline. The site is also within a coastal protection belt and within flood zones 2 and 3. So, yeah, this is just the site location. You were there this morning. It's at the bottom of Old Hall Lane, just here at the beach and seafront, obviously along there, and the main Walton on the Naze just to the south. So in October 21, planning permission was granted for wider works for the protection of for the coastal protection of that site. This included temporary measures such as sandfield bags as groins, gabions to the cliff face, and clay fill to the earth embankment, all with the aim of slowing down / preventing coastal erosion. However, following this permission being granted, ongoing erosion has resulted in part of the length of the route of the access arrangement, resulting in loss of part of that route. Previously, the access route connected via the end of Old Hall Lane and went to the foreshore before turning 90 degrees east towards a historic ramp. However, erosion has now meant that the access effectively stops at the foreshore point, and therefore this proposal is for a reinstatement of a ramp to allow access to the foreshore so that the wider works can continue. So a few photographs. This facing south towards Old Hall Lane. This is facing north towards the proposed reinstated point of the access. This is looking east towards it, and this is looking west. And this is just a photo my colleague took this morning on the site bus with you, just so you can see exactly where it is. So in terms of the principle of the development, the site is within a sensitive landscape for ecological, geological and recreational reasons. However, the works are proposed by Tendring District Council in relation to their responsibility for coastal protection. And with the sort of wider works which this forms a part of, that will help protect the surrounding land in the sort of longer term. So given that, the principle of development is accepted. Essex Highways have been consulted. They confirm from a highway and transportation perspective the impact is acceptable, given that the number of workers on site is low and vehicular movements will be scheduled to avoid travelling through Walton on the Naze at peak times. The site is within a coastal protection belt. However, the overall works are considered to be essential in order to ensure the continued effectiveness of the sea defence infrastructure. ECC Ecology have been consulted. They initially raised a holding objection due to a lack of, the previous ecological information was out of date, so a revised report has been provided in that respect, and their objections have since been lifted. The nearest residential properties are like 650 metres away, so there's going to be no impact in that regard. And then just to make a note also on the update sheet, since the agenda was published, Natural England have requested, in short, an updated assessment to understand what effects modifying the access routes may have on the foreshore and designated sites. However, on this occasion, while we do note these comments, we equally note that the works involved are a very minor variation to the previous scheme allowed, and will result in a near zero impact to the designated site, and as such we don't consider that the further detailed assessment is reasonable or necessary on this occasion. So I've just realised I haven't actually gone through a couple of the drawings. So this was what was previously approved, and apologies for this. So the route went along here and then turned right up there. I will just change my pointers so you can see it a bit clearer. It will turn right there, but basically the erosion has meant that the point here where you would turn right, that now doesn't exist. So the proposal is just to have the ramp there instead. So yeah, so in conclusion, the application seeks the modification of this access arrangement following the previous permission and due to the ongoing erosion works, and no in principle objections are raised. Essex Highways raised no objections. Essex Ecology now raised no objections. It is within a sensitive location, including the coastal protection belt, but these works are essential in the ongoing safety and protection of the coastline. So given all of the above, this is considered to be compliant and is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. There are no speakers on this item, and I'd just like to take advantage of sitting in the chairman's seat just to ask where we were this morning, Michael. It was mentioned by the officer that was there on site about the use of small mechanical diggers, machines, going in down there onto the foreshore. So I take it they'll all go down that same route we walked down this morning.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Yeah. Okay.
Basically, everything that was approved before is pretty much the same. It's just this particular end point onto the foreshore is just eroded away, so it's just an alternative measure to carry on the works as previously approved.
Thank you, Michael. Members, any questions for the officer? Councillor McWilliams.
I'm like everybody else, I've got no comments to make. It must mean that we all like the reg plan, so I'm prepared to approve it.
Proposal from Councillor McWilliams. Councillor Wiggins?
Yes, I'd like to second that, please, and I agree with everything that Councillor McWilliams has said.
So that's seconded by Councillor McWilliams as per the conditions in the officer's report. So we'll go to the vote then. I'll have a show of hands, please, for approval. Thank you, Mr. Ford. That is unanimous. That application is approved, and that just leaves me to tell you that the next meeting of the Planning Committee will be on Tuesday, the 12th of March 2024. Have a safe journey home. I'll now close the meeting.